welcome everyone. Today we're going to discuss about global peace. We have our world famous speakers, Madam Ali Rice, Professor David Smith, and Professor Donald. The world has a lot of crises and challenges right now, and we have to work together. That we have to solve this kind of problem. So let's start with Madam Ali Rice. Madam Ali Rice, what you want to add, especially when we discuss about global peace?
Okay. Well, obviously, I'm in the Cotswolds in England, so I'm part of Europe. And the first thing I wanted to say actually is one of my best friends lives in Moscow, and I met her working in the States. And I think one of the things we need to realise is that when people go to war, it's not necessarily supported by the people. So I think that the move that's happened recently. So I think one of the things that we need to be careful of is not kind of dividing ourselves from everyone, because now whilst I think most people would never support a war, having had 2 years of the pandemic of lockdowns and restrictions and the kind of the consequences of those things. So for me, I just wanted to read that she wrote to me, because they're going to lose their social networks, I think. Her son also studies in the Netherlands as well, and she thinks that his degree might be terminated as well. And she said that she's heartbroken and disgusted by what's going on. So I think that kind of humanitarian level of realizing that everyone's has families and wants to do the best by them, and that there's a humanitarian level of thinking really that we all need to realize. And maintaining peace and stability is really important. So I think that kind of individual stories, instead of kind of just brushing everyone with the same brush, I don't think most people would ever choose to do what's happened. So maintaining peace really is about understanding people and embracing diversity and culture. So that's my viewpoint from the beginning.
Thank you. Professor David Smith, what you want to add for global peace?
I agree with her 100%. It's global peace is difficult to achieve, if not impossible to achieve, because the fact that we're dealing with humans, we're dealing with emotions, we're dealing with oftentimes where logic is not the deciding factor when it comes to conflict. And so that is always going to be a challenge as we go forward. The current situation, I think, is devastating to so many. I have a development team in Ukraine, and they're okay, but they're all scattered. Half of them have left the country a week ago before it started. But they're telling me that their apartments have been destroyed, that they're living in the train stations underground, and their children are just freaking out over this, and I can totally understand that. But it will be, to me, interesting to see if the sanctions, because they are becoming so worldwide, actually work to reverse this. When you saw the dramatic decline in the ruble today, when you've seen super $100 million yachts being seized, the airspace is closed. It needs to spread further than it has. More countries need to be involved, because it seems to me the only way the sanctions will work is to have almost global sanctions going back.
Thank you.
And seeing how that goes. So I think we can maintain a semblance of peace, but absolute global peace, I think that will be a difficult challenge as long as humans are involved.
Thank you. Professor Donalds, what you want to add for global peace? Even I know that your origin from Europe, so maybe you can give us some
No,
views.
I'm actually from the United States, but I
Okay.
studied and did my graduate degrees in Finland. So I've lived in Finland and have a strong connection. And of course, the Russians are rattling their swords towards Finland right now. So it's not a comfortable situation for anyone, right? The current situation, I pretty much, I agree with what David said. We don't want to get into a shooting war with Russia. And I was reading today, and I also have friends I've been communicating with directly in Russia right now, and they can still talk to me by Twitter. And so they're beside themselves. There's quite a few Russians that put TikToks, and one of them was, the woman said, "We apologize. It's not the Russian people that are doing this. Our leader is insane," which is kind of scary because the papers like the Washington Post and the New York Times with good analysts are all saying they're wondering if Putin has gone insane, which is kind of scary. But it leads to something, which is that there was a civilization called the Indus Valley Civilization, which was mostly in Pakistan. And as far as we can tell, they went 2,000 years without having any wars. When they've excavated all of their cities, they've never found any weapons. They just simply somehow managed to build an incredible society they had very good measurement, so that when they built buildings and they built bridges or whatever things that they built, they were pretty much exactly the same. So they could measure things so well and plan things so well that they weren't like the Kalahari Bushmen in Gods Must Be Crazy. They had an extremely sophisticated society. They had sewers, they had running water, they had irrigation systems. They were, in some ways, ahead of some of the societies today. So it is possible. So I think if not completely peaceful, to be peaceful. I mean, they were a very large civilization that lasted about 2,000 years. So there's examples of it. And I looked up they don't know what this form of government is there. It's long ago and the script has never been deciphered. So they don't really know. And so there's theories, and they must have had some sort of central government, because they worked together in large groups to make these buildings and temples and all the kinds of things they made. But actually, they didn't find a lot of temples, which is interesting. I said that, but they didn't really seem to have a centralized religion. And that's what they think. One of the theories is that they didn't have leaders. They'd figured out a way to work together so that they didn't have a leader that could go crazy and attack somebody. And I looked at what the most peaceful societies are today, and number one is Iceland. And Iceland has just gone through a very, very long period with a woman leader who is beloved. And if you start looking around at the most peaceful countries, most of them have women they all have women in the governments. And when negotiations, according to what I've read, when negotiations take place, there's women on the negotiating teams, it's more successful. So I think we've got, for whatever reason, we've developed these patriarchal societies where there's authoritarian leaders. I think there's something about some people that really prefer that. It's very conservative people have basically their amygdala is larger than people who were more liberal, and their uh, anterior cingulate cortex, which is in the forebrain and is responsible for self-regulation, is larger in liberals. So there's a actual physiological difference. So it seems that when people are afraid, they prefer authoritarian leaders. And I think that you can see in the United States, Russia, that there's propaganda machines that try and make people afraid. So I think that if we want to start moving towards a peaceful world, we have to start having governments that have women in them, and governments that won't allow for authoritarian leaders to go crazy and attack each other. And I think that I think that government is a key, because I think that, as others have said, that people are basically peaceful. They don't want to fight with each other. I mean, you fight a little bit, and but it's like brothers and sisters. You can, grouse at each other, but in the end, underlying that, you only want to take it a little ways, not really far. So that's what I have to say. I think we really need to find ways of governing ourselves that make it so that we're not quite as able to just have somebody go crazy and attack somebody. And that's what I'm going to say right now.
Thank you, Professor Donald. Mr. Marshall, what you want to add for today's discussion?
Well, if I understand, and I apologize for coming in late, but so I didn't hear the first speakers. I heard part of what David said and what totally what Donald said. So I think I have the understanding that the premise is we're discussing world peace, especially in light of today's warfare that's going on between Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. And that always stimulates a conversation along these lines. I'm sure of it. My take on this, and this is just my humble opinion, is that warfare is unfortunately a part of the human psyche, not just the DNA, but part of the psyche. The question is, how do we govern it? And what do we do? I mean, if you were in a schoolyard as a youngster, you probably find that there were always bullies in the schoolyard, people who bully other people. It has to do with human psychology, and some of it might be physiological, as Donald pointed out, the size of one's amygdala or part of the brain. But I think that we all have the ability to take direction of our lives. Everyone on this planet does, if they so choose. Of course, there might be a price to be paid. Obviously, if you live in a dictatorship and you try to do something, you probably be hauled away, maybe even killed. That's unfortunately the rule of dictators and bullies. And what we're seeing today is what can be seen as a potential, and I say potential, existential threat by a bully from Russia. And the reason I say that is because he's already declared that he's putting his nuclear weapons on readiness standby. And he sent in enough soldiers to conquer Ukraine, but has been unable to do so far. Part of that in resilience of people who are standing up against him, but part of it, when you send soldiers in, and the way he did it is he didn't do a blitzkrieg with all his soldiers. He didn't want to do that, because if he did it, then everything he's proposing and promoting in his own media, that he's trying to save Ukraine from others, it doesn't become plausible, because it's a war, and he's trying to create it as a police action. But I think in terms of world peace, what it does is it brings an inflection point to what is going on in the world today. And I think people are feeling much more vulnerable not just because of these types of actions, but because of the climate crisis. Ironically, today, the IPCC issued its report. And in its report on climate change for impacts, adaptation, and vulnerability, it says that many of the climate change that has occurred for the planet is already irreversible, but that we have a small window in which to turn it around. So I think these things are tied. World peace, bullies trying to flail out, and I think Putin is flailing. I don't think some people may think he's great at a strategy. I don't think so. I think he's good at tactics, but not strategy. That's my own personal opinion. He was a KGB officer. He was never a person that had to think strategy, always had to think tactics. And he's also emotionally distraught because where was he when the Soviet Union failed? He was in Germany, East Germany, and he was devastated emotionally. He's even said that himself. So I think what we're dealing with is emotional content more than logic. It's the same reason why people are having a hard time, politicians, dealing with the climate crisis. And I think it's all tied together. We're at an existential moment in which if Putin doesn't drop nuclear bombs, well, guess what? Right behind it is a bigger tidal wave, which is the climate crisis. And we don't have a lot of time left. We need to act and act now, as the climate IPCC climate report is acknowledged. And it's all tied together. And I think one of the things that people are going to find, both in Russia, Ukraine, and other parts of the world, is that we're going to find ourselves in a position where, whether it's Putin or the climate, people are going to have to wake up and act for the process of taking charge of their own lives. The only mechanism that I know of, and it's not perfect, is a democratic process, democracy. Dictatorship works for a while, but it never succeeds over the long term. And so at least I don't see an example of that. I mean, Donald talked about ancient societies. Well, ancient societies didn't have nuclear bombs. Ancient societies didn't have a climate crisis. Ancient societies did not have existential events that is confronting the entire world. So world peace, in my opinion, is a prerequisite for human survival. If it doesn't have it, Putin won't be around. Both sides won't be around, and our children won't be around. I think I've said it on previous programs. I'm blessed to be a grandfather. I had in 2021 2 grandchildren born, 1 granddaughter, 1 grandson. Their lives are literally hanging by a thread along with the rest of us. Are they going to have a future? Are your children going to have a future? Are your grandchildren going to have a future? Will there be great grandchildren around for the young people that are around today? That's a question I think that we all have to ask ourselves. And the question really becomes, what is most important in your life? Being right, or being able to solve the issues in a democratic fashion where we can have debate and constructive discussion like we're having on this forum? So that's my take on this first round. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Alirais, there are some questions, especially I believe that our audience also very fed up because we just overcoming from COVID-19 situations.
Yeah.
I know your family also has a lot of challenges, especially in the COVID-19 situation. So,
Yeah.
and after that, we are observing this wire. And what is your advice actually? What's happening around the world? What is people mentality right now?
Well, I think, since here all the restrictions for COVID have been lifted in the UK, but COVID hasn't gone away, and I think I think essentially one of the things that frustrated me throughout the 2 years through COVID is there was there's been restrictions on our liberty as individuals to make free choices, and I think that kind of freedom of choice to go where you want to or choose how you live is really important. And I think kind of one of the things going to Marshall's So I think we just need to think more consciously about what we do, so we live more sustainably. And arguably there needs to be some kind of redistribution of wealth and support, because people are going to get displaced. So obviously there's lots of refugees that are coming out of from the crisis in Ukraine now, but that potentially is going to happen with the climate crisis ongoingly as well. So people are going to get displaced and have to move to other lands where they're safer and leave their home and their belongings for the most part behind. So I think, that kind of. So I think there's a much more kind of humanitarian vision that we need to have for the way we live and the way we kind of react. So even locally, people are collecting things for Ukraine, so that there's food parcels and gifts for children, and so it's kind of. So I think I think what's really interesting is since 2020. We've realised more than ever that we can have a local and a global reach because of the technology, and I think that's something that we should use to support that piece, and and support people to kind of gain more economic strength. And I think it's more about kind of sharing and not holding on to what's ours, but trying to share best practice and kind of remedy situations and solutions that people need. Because if they've been solved in one place, it's not difficult to replicate them somewhere else. So I think it's it's kind of living sustainably, but having a much more global picture, instead of assuming that if we're in one place and that we're not in a war zone, that we're okay. Because if you've got a humanitarian vision, it could be you and your children that were in the same spot if you just happen to be born there. So I think people need to kind of look to a broader picture, really, instead of looking at their own lives and seeing it in isolation.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. Our audience has a question for you. Monica, she wants to know how we can contribute to bringing peace to the world.
Hanukkah always asks the best questions. The way we can contribute to bringing peace in the world is actually through our interactions with others and how we work with them, and how we respond when we see people doing things that can lead to conflict. And in some instances that will work, in some it wouldn't. I was, over the weekend, I was amazed at the level of people out protesting the current war. And it is a war. There were people protesting throughout EU, people protesting. Here in Austin, we had on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday marches protesting the involvement here. We have a fairly large population of people from Ukraine here. And, being involved in things, showing the support is there. It's hard for one individual to bring peace to the world. So we need to see how we can work collaboratively to do that. You've heard me in other broadcasts talk about how group intelligence is a multiplier. I think particularly as you look at peace, as you look at how to increase the economic status of people, how we solve the grand challenges like climate change and others, the collaborative efforts have to be there. It seems to me that a lot of the current conflict really circulates around one individual. And there's even quite a bit of intelligence that even his inner circle recommended against the current action. So we need to see how that handles. One of the other pieces of data that makes this hard is both Russia and today North Korea came out and said, gee, you and I are the same. We don't listen to other people's opinions, but we're going to go out and show our place on the world stage, is what was said by the North Korea dictator. Well, it's hard to put collective action when that's the type of response. So we can work together to make it difficult for them to do that, respond, and the biggest challenge is when you're dealing with the personality. And I think this is a personality war more than anything else. When you're dealing with personalities, it's really hard to sway them. And I think that's what we're seeing as well with what has come out in the intelligence channels and what has come out in the open source news channels is that there's a lot of effort being tried, but no results yet. So, Sharif, I hope that helps.
Thank you, Professor Donald. Like we have another questions, Mahdi from Mahdi. Violence increased throughout the world. What is the reason behind it? Like,
Well, first up, I want to say what makes you think that? The author Steven Pinker wrote a great book called The Better Angels of Our Nature, where he went through and meticulously looked at the number of wars, various kinds of things, and showed that the world is gradually getting peaceful, more peaceful. So we look at any single war, but we compare it to the past, and we can see that overall, the amount of war and crime and all kinds of things has been going down, not up. So obviously, when something like is happening in the Ukraine, we are right now kind of afraid, and and it just seems like that the whole world is kind of being violent, but it is a fairly small percentage of the people that are involved in it right now. So percentage-wise and other ways, the world is getting more peaceful. And I think that Marshall kind of contradicted himself when he said that human nature was dictating that we were going to have wars, and at the same time, he poo-pooed the Indus civilization. And I asked the question, weren't they humans then? I mean, if humans are naturally warlike, then how could it be that their civilizations, the Ohlone in California also had 2,000 years with no huge events that caused so war, basically, they didn't have wars for another civilization that went for years and years. So we can. I think it was David that mentioned that, and I think Ali mentioned this too, that democratic societies are more peaceful, and societies that trade each other are much less likely to go to war with each other. So if we look at the world right now, the places where there's the most wars are not democratic, and they are kind of isolated relatively to the rest of the world in trade. It's kind of phenomenal. There's a couple of outliers like North Korea or whatever, but they're just professionally crazy. And China just jumped on the bandwagon of squeezing Russia by financial means. They're stopping buying stuff from Russia and stopping they're into the whole thing of the currency to make sure that the Russian currency is no good outside of Russia. So, but what I'm talking about is tactics in war. And what I think we want to talk about is peace. And I don't believe, I know that there's a lot of psychology experiments that I could show you because that's what I study. I'm getting my PhD and one of the key elements of what I study is sociology and social psychology. And there's a lot of experiments that show that we're fundamentally altruistic. And if you just think about it logically, the reason that human civilization is so powerful and has dominated every other species is because we coordinate our efforts, we work together, and we fundamentally want to help other people. So what is it that's making it so that we don't? And again, I think there is, as I said before, a nature that fearful people go to autocracies. So if you look at the methods that the propaganda is being used right now, like Fox News and various kinds of places that don't really send out actual news, they send out stories that try to make people afraid. And when you get a little shot of adrenaline, like people jump out of airplanes for fun and zip line and things like that, it can be exhilarating. So people get addicted to paying attention to negative things. And again, some people calibrate to negative things. Like what'll happen is they give them, various kinds of tests where there's basically a positive thing and a negative thing. And some people look at the positive thing, their eyes go to that first. And some people, their eyes go to the negative thing first. And so we have a portion of society that does have the human nature that Marshall was talking about. In the and I want to say in the United States, that's playing out with a lot of people who have a desire to have a dictator in the United States. That's what their hope and goal is. And so the United States is, I think, the longest democracy ever, though I think Athens probably went longer, but they had slaves, so it doesn't really count. It wasn't egalitarian. And it's difficult to maintain a democracy, though many countries have. And what the United States is doing, they're worth talking about because they're the biggest, biggest country in the world financially, and they have the most weapons. So we do. And so there's going to be this incredible imbalance of wealth, so that a very few people own more money than everyone else combined. And this kind of sucks the life out of the economy and sucks the life out of people's motivation and creates a difficult situation. And when people are cornered, sometimes they get violent, not because of their violent nature, but because of self-preservation. They feel they've got to do something to survive. And there's, going back to government, there's two main factors of government. I think one of them is democracy, and the other is equality of opportunity and some sort of security, so that people aren't cornered, so that people feel okay. And that, of course, is happening in Iceland, Finland, most of the Nordic countries. There's countries all over the world that are extremely peaceful. They have 6 million people about in Finland, and they have 3,000 people in jail. That's it. In the United States, 5% or I forget, but some huge percentage of people are in jail or have been in jail, so that they're social pariahs forever. Why is that? Why are people's human nature in Finland so much different than people's human nature in the United States? They're not. I mean, we're all just people. And it has to do with government and the theory of government and democracy. So I don't know how to get autocratic countries to become democratic countries. Sometimes people try and they go back to being autocratic, and it's just democracy is something that we have to all work together to make happen. It's not, it's in some ways not a natural state, but it's also from all the evidence in the world that we've seen in history. As I said, the Indus Valley civilization didn't seem to have leaders. They somehow managed to work together without that. So it is possible, and that's where we really need to head right now.
Thank you. Mr. Marshall, there is one question from Alea. She wants to know, how does the peace building field assess the impact of its work?
That's an excellent question, Sharif. I think, like anything else, one assesses your work through the results and measurement. So there's an old concept in both construction, manufacturing, science, that you test and measure. That's what it's called. And one can do it. Also in the field of psychology, I noticed that Donald's going for his PhD in sociology, I believe, which is a great boon. And social psychology. So I have my background. I have a degree in clinical psychology, and I'm very familiar with the research he's talking about. And but just like he's going to find research that says that humans tend to be altruistic, you're going to find the opposite. All you need to do is go, and I'm not suggesting this is the be-all or end-all of research in this field, but if anybody is familiar with Skinner and Skinnerian techniques and behavioral models, you'll know that in his model, humans are not altruistic. They're motivated by not altruism, but other behaviors. And in clinical psychology, we know one thing, that people make most of their decision making, both in business and science, other than through experimental rigor. But when they're making decisions, such as the decision that Putin made to invade Ukraine, it's mostly based upon emotional content, not logical content. One may think that Putin is a logical person, but in my opinion, he made an emotional decision, not a logical decision. Had he made a logical decision, he probably would have listened to the people around him and not invaded. Because as Donald pointed out, there are people out there that we know, or I think it was David that pointed out that there's intelligence that says that many of the people didn't agree with him, but he's a dictator and what he says goes. So the question becomes, not the Indus population, and I don't think I contradicted myself, by the way, Donald. I think what I was showing, I think you may have misunderstood me, is that the Indus population of 1,000 years is great, but when was that? Did they have nuclear weapons? Did they even have howitzers? They look at World War II and look at how the Nazis created World War II to occur. Very similar to what Putin just tried to do, a variation of a theme on it. There is a protocol that Putin took from the book of the Nazis. The Nazis started World War II by dressing up his own soldiers, Hitler did, into Polish uniforms and attacked and killed his own soldiers so that he could have a pretext for a war. That it's very well known, it's documented. And so you have to ask yourself, is that human behavior that we want to encourage? Because the discussion here is not about one civilization or another, ancient or modern. We're here and now. And so in the here and now, how do we create and build world peace, and how do you measure it is the question that is being asked right now of me. So I would say that the modality that we can use to acquire world peace, and I'm an optimist, I do believe it's possible, but I also believe we have to be realistic. And that what gathers people around like nothing else in life is extinction or life-threatening situations. People tend to band themselves together. Now, you can point to the Ohlone people, which is a great example of peace, and it was a different civilization, a different decision-making process. But in today's modern world, the decision-making process since World War II has been us versus them. And then the question is, how do we solve that us versus them problem? Part of the us versus them problem was articulated by David, who pointed out that there is a discrepancy between first world leaders, and I think, Donald, you pointed that out too. 1% of the population owns more assets than the rest of everybody else on the planet. That's not exactly a balanced society or a balanced fair. So I work, and as I'm sure we all would wish to work, to bring more equality to the world. How does one go about doing it, and how does one measure that? Well, the method that we're using is to create good paying jobs and equality, and at the same time create a triple bottom line, meaning put people first, put the environment next, the planet next, and then profits at the end. And the way you do that is by attacking the environmental issues and creating more equality in the developing world. There's also, as you pointed out, Donald, there's absolute discrepancy in the United States with regard to us versus them, between what Trumpism has done to the Republican Party, which is quite ironic considering the Republican Party was started by Abraham Lincoln, who attempted to end slavery, and then we ended up with Jim Crow in the United States, which was a form of slavery or discrimination. So to say that a democracy doesn't have slavery is not true. The United States slavery for hundreds of years since its beginning, until the 1861, 62, and 65, until it ended officially. But it still exists in many parts of the world, and democracies are not exempt from it. What makes us exempt from it is making decisions, as you pointed out, Donald, taking the bull by the horns and getting people to discuss things on a level playing field. The only way to measure that, in my humble opinion, is to do what we're doing currently. The IPCC report is a classic example of that kind of measurement. Why is that a measurement of peace? Because if we don't solve the existential threat to the planet, then we're all doomed. There's a cartoon, I have it, I can send it to anybody who wants to see it, that was published at the beginning of the pandemic. And it showed a city with 3 tidal waves, one greater than the other. And the first tidal wave was the pandemic. It was COVID-19. And in the cartoon, there's a little caption that says, and you can't even see the characters, it says in the city, "Son, wash your hands, wear your mask, and socially distance, and then you'll be okay." In the meantime, that's dealing with that tidal wave. Right behind that tidal wave is the tidal wave of biodiversity. And what does that mean? The tidal wave of biodiversity. We are losing species at an exponential rate. In Australia alone, not that far from Malaysia, there were billions of species incinerated by forest fires that occurred. And people say, oh, that was a forest fire. Well, that's part of the climate change process. It's not a weather pattern. It's a greater pattern. And then behind that is a bigger tidal wave. And that's the climate crisis, which the IPCC report is distinguishing, that we're going to be at 1.2 degrees centigrade. When we get there, we are, as a species and as other species along with us, may cease to exist unless we do something about it now. We have a small window to do it. And my contention is use that opportunity to galvanize people of like minds, people from Ukraine, Russian citizens who are against the war. By the way, the Belarus dictator, he's beholden to Putin, but the Belarus people don't like him. They're watching right next door what the Ukrainians are doing to the Russian army. And so that might trigger something else. So my point is that if you want to measure peace, measure it by equality, measurements of equality and discussion and the ability for living standards to rise in the developing world. Without the developing world, the planet is doomed. That's my opinion. Because the first world, look what it's done for the past 200 years. It certainly brought fossil fuels and coal to the table, and it created great value in Canada, the United States, in the Western world. But what about the developing world? They're far behind. And that fosters what? It fosters dictators, people who are not looking out for the best benefit for their children or their grandchildren. They don't care about that. They care about themselves and their own wealth right now. And you saw that, by the way, at COP26. The largest population that attended COP26 was obviously the people from Scotland because they hosted it. The next largest population were U.S. governmental citizens, and the next one after that were Chinese governmental citizens. The third largest wasn't even a government. It was the people who were protesting COP26 in a very interesting way. It was the coal and fossil fuel market lobbyists, as well as big ag and big chemistry. Why were they there? By the way, it was very interesting. Suddenly, at the end of COP26, Modi of India declared that he's going to have net zero by 2050. Well, if we wait to 2050, it's too late. But there are people in India that know that, and they understand that. And India is a democracy, hopefully, and shall remain so. So we want our fellow Indians, we want our fellow Pakistanis, we want our fellow citizens of the developing world to take the opportunity to attack the climate crisis together with the rest of the world and step up to the plate and create better living standards in their countries. It can be done. It's been done before, as Donald pointed out, in other societies. But right now, we're living in an existential time zone in which people have nuclear weapons and are threatening them, such as Putin. The United States is not threatening to use nuclear weapons. Western Europe is not. UK has them. They're not. France has them. They're not. But somebody is. So what happens when somebody unleashes a nuclear weapon? What do we do then? So we need to stop this before it gets beyond the point of no return, just like the climate crisis. And the only way to do that is to create equality, in my opinion, is help the developing world to bring jobs, better quality, and using the climate crisis to do that. We know we can do that. If we act together and we use education and we use the 17 Sustainability Development Goals of the UN, we can reach that ability. There's an expression in the climate world: time is of the essence, and it's no more. It is shown no more flagrantly than this conflict with Ukraine. Time is of the essence. If we don't solve the problem and get rid of the bullies in the schoolyard, we are always going to be bullied. And measuring that is very simple. Just watch how many people are subjugated. But the key, in my opinion, is to create jobs in the developing world, and that will then pull and trigger other people around the world to want to have peace, because peace, in my opinion, is possible. And so that's my take right now. Thanks.
Thank you. This is really great discussions, and we all want peace, because peaceful world is very important for us. So definitely we're gonna support all of the initiative actually taken by UN or developed world to solve this problem. Now I want to go for the concluding remarks. First, I request Madam Ali, what's your concluding remarks for today's discussion?
Yeah, well, I just think it's the interconnection of the world, really, and how things impact us all. So I think 2020 and the global crisis, if it did anything, it brought us all together, and it was the first time that everyone was faced with the same threat, really. And I think it galvanized relationships, and it brought fear, but it brought some kind of humanitarian wholeness as well. So the world felt like at one place, as opposed to something that was divided and to be conquered. So I think that kind of that outlook that if somebody's that everybody should imagine that if they were in the situation that the Ukrainers, what would they want and how would they expect people to react. So I think it's just having grace about how the human existence is, really, and that interconnection with things.
Thank you. Professor David Smith, what's your concluding remarks for today?
I really would like to see the world come together to stop this war. Now, we see pictures this morning of cluster bombing being used, which is a horrible form that's really directed at civilians. There's very graphic pictures of moms with their legs blown off and stuff like that being shown in the different world. The only way I believe for this one in is if the rest of the world comes together and demands that it ends, and demands through both economic means, relationship means, and showing that the world can work together. For the world to solve the climate issue, we're going to have to work together on that issue as well. So in some ways, the parallel between ending a war like this and being successful in combating climate change have very similar characteristics. We do have to come together and work as one world to do it. My prayers are is that this ends without much more bloodshed. Looking at the technologies coming into play, looking at the escalation, looking at the fact that tactical nuclear weapons are being moved into Belarus, makes me really worried about where this one's headed. It's part of the Russian doctrine that tactical nuclears are okay to use, just not the big ones. I think if that happens, this will escalate to a point where it becomes a global crisis to the highest degree. I hope we can work together and bring the resources together and be united to stop this and extend some global peace for a while. So, Sharif, that's my concluding remarks.
Thank you, Professor Donald.
Well, I will say that one thing I want to mention is that in the late 60s or early 70s, I forget exactly the date, Noam Chomsky wrote a paper about behavioral psychology. And he showed that it couldn't possibly reflect the way humans are. And it sort of ended behavioral psychology academically. And a new form of psychology called cognitive psychology became the standard, which was actually first invented by William James, but and it was kind of set aside for a long time. The good part of behavioral psychology was that it just said we can't know what's going on in a person's mind, so we're only going to study actual behavior. So it tried to put psychology on a completely empirical sense. And of course, we can study cognition, but it's indirect. So but to support what Marshall said and to reinforce something that I said, I'd like to mention Stanley Milgram's famous experiment where he basically took a group of people and made them randomly, just divided it into two groups completely randomly. And they played a game where half of them were prisoners and the other half were guards. And once the people became prisoners, they started becoming very mean. They were actually mean to the prisoners, and this was an experiment to kind of show how fascism happened. And I was just reading an interesting thing last night that when people become powerful, parts of their brain shut down. And the part of your brain with mirror neurons. And what mirror neurons are neurons in your brain that make you feel what's going on with other people, or at least what their bodies are doing. And of course, emotions and feelings are just us looking at our interoceptive networks. And along that line, I want to point out something. There's some fabulous work now done in neuroscience, quite a bit, And a neuroscientist named Antonio Damasio wrote a book called Descartes' Error. And he pointed out that no matter how rational you are, how logical you are, there's some point where you have to decide that you have the right solution. And that decision is made by feeling. So there's not possible for us to make decisions completely rationally. There's an emotional component to even the most rational decision. And I want to go, I think that if you take what I'm saying, it shows both the two sides that I'm talking about. On one side, the thing about altruism that I'm talking about is now we basically turned out to be the key, because we know so much now about neuroscience, and that's because of our mirror neurons. It's built into us to be able to be empathetic. But on the other hand, there's this tendency when power is completely unevenly divided for the people that are in power to kind of lose it. And so again, democratic societies are and that attempt to become egalitarian, like Finland is an example. People at the highest levels are taxed. There's progressive income tax, so the people at the highest levels are taxed quite heavily, and it kind of levels the playing field. So those are things that we can actually do. What can we do right now? It's, as David said, it's kind of a scary situation because it isn't that way, and we have the worst case of autocrats and dictators. I want to say that one of the most peaceful societies in the world, let me see if I can remember their name. I think I have it here saved up on a link that I'm going to click, is the, oh, well, I'm not going to spend time hunting for it, but it's Samai people, if I remember correctly, Samai people that are in Malaysian Peninsula. So Malaysia has the luck that they can go and study people that actually live in Malaysia and have a society in Malaysia that has remained extremely peaceful. And what's interesting about that is it goes to psychology, because the self-image that the people have of themselves is being nonviolent. And they say they rarely get angry, they don't hit each other, and that's because they see themselves in that way. And we had a speaker on this show for a long time who always said, work on yourself. And it's not going to change anything right now, but we can see ourselves as peaceful and wanting to help each other. And the ultimate thing that has to happen is we have to have democratic governments that trade with each other and respect each other. Maybe a global federalism someday, that would be nice. But that's where we are right now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Professor Jackson, thank you for joining today's sessions. We have world famous entrepreneurs, Professor Jackson, very helpful professors and always very enthusiastic and positive. We have our other speakers, Madam Ali Rice from UK, Professor David Smith from USA, Professor Donald from USA, Mr. Marshall from USA, and Professor Jackson from Singapore. Professor Jackson, what you want to add for today, especially when we discuss about global peace?
Yes, sorry, I just joined, but I think that we can have peace in under a few conditions. The first condition would be that peace is more profitable than war. And today, war is more profitable than peace. When I say it's more profitable, I mean it's more profitable to the people who make the decision on behalf of all the people in the world. For example, if the American military industrial complex employs so many people and is profitable, then they would have to create wars so that they could sell weapons. Otherwise, they couldn't keep this industrial, all these jobs going. So, so when it's profitable to have war or at least to have tension, then we will have tension. If we change that and citizens doesn't want war anymore, and politicians cannot win votes because they are supported by weapon manufacturers, then I think things will change. But the narrative that will have to be done by the media. So then the second condition is that the media has to be a constructive media rather than media that create sensation, speculation, bias analysis, and catering for a certain type of readership that they cultivate. So a constructive media is needed. And then the next is that to have a constructive media, the consumer of the media have to be educated. And if they understood the trade-off just in the same way as the Nordic state understood that they are paying higher taxes because they're getting better services and they have a fairer society, then these educated people, and I don't mean that they need to be educated at the university level, they just need to have the values education, then they would be able to decide to say, no, this is not good for the whole community and we don't like it. We used to have elders in villages like that, in tribes like that, and this have to come back, right? And then we need to change the fashion from consumption to impact and purpose. So if our life is currently designed based on I consume, therefore I am, then I've got to go out there to buy clothes, throw away, buy lots of stuff, including throw away relationship, and everything becomes very temporary because we are trying to consume to let other people see us consuming. But if we were to switch that fashion towards like a billionaire is one that improved the life of a billion people, then you are measured according to your purpose and your contribution to society, to humanity, to environment. And actually, if you are really such a person, you don't even care if you're measured. You're just living it as a lifestyle. And if we're moving the lifestyle into a purpose lifestyle, then the therapeutic effect of seeing others gets better, makes you feel good, and that's your reward. And of course, you still need to eat, you still need to pay some bills, but that is considered like the easiest thing to do because you are not consuming a lot. And I think if we change these few things, we will have world peace.
Mhm. Thank you, Professor, for your excellent analysis. Uh, we are really impressed. Even I saw few of your posts in social media previously, who are like who is billionaires. This is really really impactful dialogues. I believe that I learned a lot personally, and we have a good news with Professor Jackson. We are collaborating together for solving human trafficking issues in Malaysia. and some largest NGO like Mappings, those who actually support 3,000 mosques in Malaysia, they are also agree to collaborate with our initiative. I think this is huge problem in Malaysia. Actually, Professor Jackson always focus on some complicated issues, but good point is that he solved it, and I believe other corporations like NGO like BRAC or Tata, they will join in our initiative. And beside that, Professor Jackson, our partners, Mr. Marshalls, Professor Donalds, Professor David Smith, Madam Ali Rice, we have hundreds of organizations and the professors and the government officials, they will join. But good point is that, Professor, you have many friends, those who are prime ministers, presidents around the world. So what do you think? What is the person's perception of politicians, specifically for the global peace?
I think we have been training graduates and academic excellence and even technological excellence, but we have not been training leadership. And there's no school that is trying to produce world leaders, state leaders, village leaders, um, community leaders. And leadership is kind of like, okay, you are a good leader because you can lead a department to improve the KPI next quarter and you just got the profits up 20% higher than last quarter, you're a good leader. I think that we need to focus on leadership development from childhood, from how to remove their prejudice, that they do not end up seeing that if the father of a child is picking the child up in a Mercedes and another one is coming on from a bicycle, then they start to learn how to discriminate rich and poor gap, and then skin colors, and then religions and all this. And I think that if we were to teach them from kindergarten age at 4 years old how to be good leaders, how to care, how to love, how to look at things from the other person's point of view, will the other child be hurt if you say such thing? Or even if you think this way, would that child be uh, uh, traumatized if you bully him and whatever? So I think when we're teaching leaders, we have to go at the moment they understand language that you could teach, move 4 years old, 5 years old, and leadership has to start there through primary school, through secondary school, and then they don't become deteriorated adults, because adults are deteriorated children. Children are lovely people. They are laughing and forgiving and playing and creative and learning and absorbing. But by the time they are 12, 13 years old, they became very afraid of society, afraid of failing examination, afraid later on of not getting a good job, afraid of everything. And then they live an entire life of fear after that. So if we could teach them not to be afraid, and don't teach them too much about the scarcity, but teach them about abundance thinking, I think we will be able to grow a whole breed of new leaders in one generation. And it will take maybe 20 years, but it is 20 years pass very fast. And if there are countries or even online teaching, open source, yeah, that people can take it and use it. I already know that there are a lot of courses like that just need more marketing and more push, and a lot of them are doing it altruistically, very very cheaply or at no cost at all. So I think we have to find these people and help them disseminate and help them amplify their impact. Maybe we don't even have to do a lot to reinvent it. Maybe it's already available. And if it's not, we can help to grow a bit. And I think that people will start to realize that living a life of helping other people is actually making our body very healthy. All the chemicals in our body is balanced. We are joyful. And that's a very high quality of life. You don't need to carry a Louis Vuitton handbag or a Rolex watch that to say that you have a quality life. That's just for other people to see. But for yourself to feel, I think if you are helping people, something therapeutic is happening in your body. I retired when I was 40 years old from business, and now I'm 65. And for the last 25 years, I've been working for free, uh, solving the sanitation crisis with 2.5 billion people without toilets. And the last 20 years, we actually brought 2.5 billion new people with toilets. And half of them would not have toilet because they never even think about having a toilet because they were a low income people. And so it is possible to make change by just wanting to. You don't even need a roadmap, you just need a compass. And you just think this has got to go away and this problem will be solved. And you don't know how, and you start. And the moment you start, while you are finding the way is finding you. And you will continue to find that there are more and more people attracted to this journey that they join you. They don't follow you, they join you. They co-create with you. They're walking side by side with you, not behind you. And I think if we are able to create lots of people thinking like that, then they can, in my case, I chose toilets and now I chose poverty elevation through efficient marketplace, but they could choose thousands of things like, autism or aging population or homelessness or water filtration, energy, healthcare, education, all kind of things are needed. And if everybody, whenever they found a problem, it's like they found an opportunity to be happy, then I think we will have fantastic culture and a peaceful world.
Thank you, Professor. The last questions I want to take from our audience, and we are in the concluding moments. Onika, how we can contribute to the bringing the peace to the world? So, yes, Professor Jackson.
We can bring if you look at the Ukraine situation, there are a lot of people making tremendous profit out of it. You just didn't understand why is this happening, because when this happened, oil prices go up and America produced the most oil, and of course the oil company makes money, and then the Saudis makes money, and then the Putin himself also makes money. So all people who benefit are benefiting at the expense of the Ukrainian innocent people who are going to either be traumatized or some of them get killed, right? And then why is all this rhetoric going on but no real action? Is because um, their profit might be affected if they take action. So everything in this story about Ukraine is about profit. And then the weapon manufacturers start to get more profit because more people are scared. And so if you think about oil and weapons, that is what's driving all these wars. And of course the banking, the business. So and the media is just feeding fire. So So if we were to step back and say, wait a minute, who is actually benefiting from war? If you research and understand who benefit from war, you stop them, you will stop war. Because people by nature, whether they are Russian or Ukrainian or Germans or Singaporean or African, all they want to do is to have income, have work, bring up family, go to supermarket, eat, have sex, and watch television, and they're happy. They don't want to have war, but the people who profit want to have war. So you just have to know who profit, and you will know why we have war.
Thank you, Professor Jackson. Mr. Marshall, what's your concluding remarks for today?
Well, I think listening to the professor preceding me, I think I first of all, I want to thank him for his contribution to what he's been doing since he retired. And that's what we need to do. We all need to take a page from his book and execute as he has done over the past number of years. And I think that would be, if we all did that, and as he articulated, if we all stood together and shoulder to shoulder and in our own way contributed to this process, we would accomplish world peace. I also think that there's another component I would add to what the professor said, and that is time is of the essence. As I just announced today on this session, the IPCC has issued its report. It's kind of being overshadowed by what's going on in the Ukraine, but it shouldn't be. It should be top of mind for everybody, because what it's talking about is a greater existential threat than even Putin. Yes, Putin may execute and throw tactical nuclear weapons out there. Hopefully he doesn't, and hopefully the world will stand against that. And that's an immediate threat. But we have a threat right behind it, a bigger tidal wave, and that is the climate crisis. And what the professor said is the solution. We need to bring education, that like the Talent Economic World Forum is doing, and educate people about the opportunities as much as the threats. And that's what I like about what the professor said. He's looking from a positive point of view and not just complaining about what is out there. He's taking action, and we all need to do that. We need to take action and work together to execute opportunities to create the developing world with an equality that, in terms of lifestyle, and when I say lifestyle, I'm not talking about Gucci bags, as the professor pointed out. Gucci bags is not the criteria for quality of life. The quality of life is, are your children and your children's children going to grow up in an atmosphere where they can live together, contribute to the world, create a peaceful environment in which everyone can conduct their daily affairs and business. Just bringing toilets to the table, or no pun intended, actually toilets to the toilet, that the professor has done is a huge contribution, especially in the developing world. That gives people a different sense of self, a different sense of life. And as our colleague, both David and Donald and Ali have mentioned, our colleagues, they're all, I'm really honored to be on this panel with them, because they're all articulating a facet from everyone's own perspective, but we're all having a calm discussion about this, and we can disagree on certain things, but ultimately the goal is to bring about world peace, and that can, in my opinion, be done. There is an opportunity there. I think what Donald brought forth in terms of the Ohlone Indians or the ancient civilizations for 1,000 years of being peaceful shows, yes, it can be done in human DNA and human genome development. But the question is, we have more existential threats ever than before created by humans. So the question is not to focus on the negative, but to focus on the positive, as our professor has done. Let's bring the proverbial toilets to the world. Let's bring more ability to create climate restoration and climate repair in a world that is sorely devastated by SO2 emissions. That's sulfur dioxide. It was started in the United States, and now it's in the Southern Hemisphere. because what did the United States do? It offshored its manufacturing capacity to that world, where these industrial processes cause these GHG emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. So I think it's imperative that we all shoulder to shoulder stand together, have more dialogue like this, and again, proverbially follow the lead of the professor, bring more toilets into the world, and flush the garbage down, and use the garbage as a cyclical economy to turn waste into energy, but not only energy, but into products that further reduce environmental impacts, which, as anyone who's been following this program knows, that's what we're doing. We take organic waste and inorganic waste and convert it into products and we're going to try to do that in India, in Malaysia, and throughout the developing world, sub-Saharan Africa. But the first and foremost opportunity to do that is we need to communicate through programs like this and educational opportunities that the World Talent Economic Forum brings to the table to educate people, give them the opportunities. It's one of the 17 sustainability goals of the UN. So we need to educate, we need to eliminate and eradicate poverty. And I think if we follow the 17 development goals, we will achieve world peace. That's my opinion. And I'm working towards that. I know everybody on this panel thinks similarly, if not exactly. We're not exactly in alignment on everything, but I thank you for having me on this panel, and I really want to promote everybody here to be successful in their endeavors. And thank you all.
Thank you. From our speakers, other speaker, if you want to add any point with Professor Jackson, you can. I think, yes. Anyone? Professor Donalds or Professor David Smith or Madam Ali Rice?
I'll just, I really want to second what Jack was saying, because it goes back to what I was saying, which is that it's important for individuals to like think of themselves as peaceful. In the United States, we have, and the world, and in fact, in the show, we talk often about meritocracy. And it's the idea that people battle their way to the top. And you talk to people that are business people and others, they love the book, The Art of War. And it's a text. At Stanford, my acquaintance, Jim March, taught a leadership class, and his 3 books were Don Quixote, War and Peace, and Crime and Punishment. And he said, War and Peace teaches you everything you need to know about strategy. Don Quixote teaches you everything you need to know about leadership. And that Crime and Punishment is everything you really need to know about ethics. And that leads into something that there's kind of I've talked about it before, and it's a long thing, but meritocracy is not necessarily useful. We just kind of consider it to be, but it's not. So we think of ourselves rather as battling each other and being in war with everyone, and we start understanding that society, when other people are better off, you're better off. And I mean, if you want to put it just on an economic point of view, but as I mentioned before with mirror neurons, I mean, think about your life. If you help somebody get a girlfriend or a job or a boyfriend or whatever it happens to be, how do you feel about yourself when you're lying in bed thinking about your day? There's nothing better. And so we need to nurture that aspect of ourselves. And I think education that we're talking about all the time is STEM, where we're just talking about like basically training people to get into the battle and become the best. And I think we need to do like Jack said and really start switching, having part of our education be people really understanding the importance of our empathy and the importance of us be a real clear understanding of the fact that we're sort of all one. I mean, your language, your values, everything comes from other people. And so we absolutely need to get people to understand that. And I think that would definitely lead to a more peaceful world.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. Professor Jack, what's your concluding remarks? And World Talent Economy Forum with you, with your humanitarian effort, especially you are trying to solve these uh, uh, many important issues in Malaysia. So I believe that many important NGO, even from Malaysia, they are happy to work with you. And from the global arena, many people, many organizations, Tando, Transhumanist, many famous artists from Hollywoods, and many organizations, those who work with, collaborate with World Talent Economy Forum. Uh, Everybody with you, especially for your initiative for solving these human trafficking issues. This is very important, I believe, in Malaysia and for Singapore. So thank you for your continuous support. And one thing I just want to add, when he give me the task, this assignment, I become afraid. Hey, I have to work with all of the gangsters and the corrupted people, the politicians, and the, oh my God, it's a very difficult thing. I call him again and again and again. But after that, he said, yes, everything has positive and negative. Find out the positive people. Then I start working, moving forwards. I find thousands of people has this kind of problem, and they need the solutions. I say, hey, that is good thing. So that's why I request our audience, these are the people actually motivator, why we bring this kind of people, because they know how to motivate people, how to find out the strategy. Even in my this is I feel that, hey, I will be failed, this project is very difficult, but even yesterday night I find, hey, now it's easy, I can understand, at least there are many good people around us. So bring the right kind of people, good people in your life, and good people can solve many problems. So I believe we need mentor like Professor Jack, Mr. Marshall, Professor David Smith, Professor Donald, and Madam Ali Rice. Mentor can help us to guide us. So that's why we are taking responsibility of the young people, and these are the mentors. They can help us, they can guide us, and we can solve the problem. So thank you, Professor Jackson, for your continuous supports, and we will support your initiative and we will make things happen. So Professor Jackson, what's your concluding remarks for today?
I think that the traditional growth of society originally started with communes and little groups of villagers, and they help each other, and they live together with their stories and folklore, and things goes quite well. After a while, some guys are more muscular than others, and they say, if we go and kill the other village guys and rape all their women, we will have all their cattle, and we will have more children, and we'll be powerful. And that's how empires start: rape and plunder. And so the rape and plunder created a lot of celebrities called Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan the Great, Akbar the Great. And as long as you rape and plunder plenty and plenty of people and kill and steal and grab their land and grab their cattle, you are called the Great. And this kind of a barbaric society then transformed into rape and plunder, not in the barbaric sense, but as bad, is how to grab all the money from everybody else and become a billionaire. And so this rape and plunder culture continue, and this is all masculine. And if we want to solve the problem, we have to move from a masculine culture of being a silverback gorilla to a feminine culture, like a mother. The mother facilitates the children. Your mother facilitate you and the whole family, and ensure that the family grows up well and healthy and educated and have good values and everything. And the mother does not claim any credit for the success of the children and the husband and even herself. She just felt that it's so nice to do this job. And if all of us can become the mothers of our job, our societal responsibility, our leadership, and facilitate other people and don't claim the credit and are just happy that the other people are getting much better than before, I think the world will be very good. So we have to start to move to a feminine philosophy. I'm not talking about female gender or feminist or feminism. I'm talking about a feminine philosophy that both men and women can adopt, and we will have a very nice world. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. We want to develop the nice word, but we believe we have people like you who has lot of friend from Prime Minister or from Prime Minister office, from President office. We should convince them that we do not need war. We need more peaceful worlds. And there are many complex issues we need to solve. So from 2 March, World Talent Economy Forum, we are supporting 3,200 students in South Asia for world largest hydrothon. So I strongly request specifically from our audience, those who want to support our initiative, you can join. 3,200 students actually joining these hydrothons. And beside that, 22 March, we have special summit on World Water Day. So I believe all of our speakers, those who join today, they will join, and many famous people also join in this summit. So we are trying to nurturing the youth people and so trying to solving the complex problem. So Professor Jack, if you have specifically training for leadership, we will happy to share with our youth communities. So you can train them, the youth communities. So thank you everyone for these excellent sessions. So I believe there are many work we can solve together, many problem we can solve together, but we need right kind of team. I believe World Talent Economy has right people and the right team. Thank you, Professor Jackson, Mr. Marshall, Professor Donald, Professor David Smith, Madam Ali Rice for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. And thank you all of our audience. Please share our content with your government, with corporations, and with academy. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Hey, Sharif, another great program.